You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
I remember when Nick Drake died, I didn't really know about it for about, possibly, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks, because the only way you could find out in those days was the music press. The wider press weren't going to write about him. And do you remember Jim Morrison?
When Jim Morrison died in 1971, I'm pretty sure the first word of it anywhere in the press was the Melody Maker ran a short piece, saying we've heard a rumor from Paris that Jim Morrison had died. And they obviously couldn't confirm it. And then it wasn't until a week later that they got a confirmation from Los Angeles that it happened. So effectively 2 weeks. Contrast that with the news of the death of Michael Nesmith on Friday evening, which within minutes is absolutely
everywhere,
all over the internet, and is suddenly interesting media that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be interested in it. The Today program and all the newspapers and all these kind of outlets want to know Michael Nesmith. And it just struck me out. Now I know Michael Nesmith is not an obscure figure at all, because he did all sorts of extraordinary things over the course of an extraordinary life. But it struck me, the obscure rock death just doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't.
The person who dies forgotten, it doesn't happen, because there will be fans out there of some kind that will wish to have this noted.
And in the same way that no matter how obscure you might be, there's somebody always flying a flag for you, aren't there? There's somebody writing about Nick Jones' penguin eggs, or they're writing about Vashti Bunyan,
yes,
or somebody, and that's great. Yes. All those people's reputations are kept alive, I love
it. It is, because as we talk about Michael Nesmith, there was a period where, and obviously pre-internet, where his reputation was completely, the flame of his reputation was entirely down to one small magazine in the UK, which is Zigzag.
Yeah.
Zigzag was the only media outlet in the world that cared what Michael Nesmith was doing for that period, in the middle 70s. Absolutely extraordinary. But anyway, Michael Nesmith, I was
listening to one of his records this morning, Dave, and I've got to quote you a lyric. It's so lovely. I'm hearing the light from the window. I'm seeing the sound of the sea. My feet have come loose from their moorings. I'm feeling quite wonderfully free.
Absolutely.
Isn't that a great lyric?
It is.
Hearing the light. And
it's only a whimsical notion to fly down to Rio tonight. And I probably won't fly down to Rio. But then again, I just might. There's wonderful.
Isn't that lovely?
And the words actually perfectly echo the characteristic of Nesmith's music throughout his career, which is kind of lightness. The anti-gravity feeling about all Mike Nesmith's music. There was nothing heavy, nothing abrasive about Mike Nesmith's music, really. But he'd got some kind of foothold in the music business before the Monkees, hadn't he?
Because, he had. Well, he'd just come out. He'd been in the Air Force before that. Extraordinary. He'd written various songs. He'd had a Paul Butterfield blues band recorded "Mary, Mary." He had a publishing deal. He'd written quite a few songs actually, and then he got tipped off when he was 23 that Bob Raffleson and Bert Schneider were trying to put together this knockabout comedy, kind of based on the idea that in Help, there's that moment when the Beatles walk through their 4 individual doors. Do you remember? And finish up in a communal living space. And that's kind of the idea of the whole thing, really, isn't it? It's kind of Beatles-alike. Also a genius thing, which I never realized at the time. I was 12 when it started, that actually there's no adult supervision in the Monkees. There's no adult characters. It's just this free-form knockabout kids, crazy kids having a wonderful
Yeah.
It's really interesting. But, he was signed as an actor and not required to play and not required to write. I mean, he did write. He had 2 songs, in fact, on the first album. But mostly it was, Neil Diamond, I'm a Believer, and Boyce and Hart.
Boyce and Hart and Carole King, all kinds of people. Really good songwriters.
Oh, really good present. I mean, I thought the Monkees song, those hits were fantastic.
Yeah.
But for him, it curdled quite quickly. I can remember being very attracted to the idea as a kid, actually, that he was the one who seemed to be sending it all up. He seemed to be a bit uncomfortable about it and a bit embarrassed about it all. If you looked at them when they were meant to be miming, he would deliberately mime really badly and send it all up. And very soon he got very hacked off because he thought he should be writing more songs. And, in fact, I'm very outspoken. I mean, I think at one point there was a press conference. He was talking about More of the Monkees, which was their second album. He described it as probably the worst record in the history of the world. This band that he's actually in, So he was very, very uncomfortable and was obviously writing more stuff at the time. He wrote different drum for Stone Ponies, Linda Ronstadt's band, and was just very frustrated by it. And then discovered, of course, that had he been in a rock band, he could have probably just flounced out. But this was a TV contract, so he had to buy his way out. And he finished up paying $150,000 to get out of the Monkees, and
which he could by then he could well afford, because they made so much money in such a short period of time. I mean, if you weren't around at the time, you won't be aware of the fact just how huge the Monkees were, sort of 66, 67. So huge that I think the reason that Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever were peeled off Sgt. Pepper and put out as a single was to wrest back the spotlight from the Monkees, which was entirely the Monkees
the vacuum, hadn't they?
Were the most popular pop group in the world, for that period of time. Anyway, I've been getting out his his various solo efforts, and I found this morning, which I haven't played in absolutely years. 1967, facing a tax bill, he had to get rid of, quite a lot of money or spend it, so that he didn't get all his tax in one year. He spread it out over a number of years. And so he needed to get rid of $50,000. So he hired all of LA's session men, and I mean all of LA's session men, 4 piano players, 10 drummers, all this kind of stuff. Hired them for a weekend where it was, as a consequence, double time, and just got them in the studio to kind of jam their way through a load of his songs. And that's the record that resulted, came out in 1968. It's called Mike Nesmith Presents the Wichita Train Whistle Sings. And it's arranged by Shorty Rogers, and it features all the LA session men, which you would think would make it really good. But actually, it's unlistenable. It's genuinely unlistenable.
But it didn't matter. The point was to just get rid of a load of cash.
Get rid of the cash.
Quick before somebody else took it.
As quick as he possibly could. But then, he left the group and he formed, the first national band, who were a kind of, and they made these 4 records here, which you've got Magnetic South, Loose Salute, Nevada Fighter, Tantamount to Treason, Volume 1, all came out on RCA. I can only describe these as a kind of cross between the Flying Burrito Brothers and Van Dyke Parks.
Yeah.
If 2 such things had ever been allowed to come together. Absolutely beautiful, impressionistic, all sorts of interesting production techniques being used in there. And then kind of old country songs and Roy Rogers tunes and She Thinks I Still Care and Tumbling Tumbleweeds and all these kind of things. These records were absolutely beautiful. Still are. You could not give them away, these records. And they all came out on RCA, which had been the Monkees record label. And obviously, they must have been contractually obliged to press up a certain number and to make sure they were in a certain number of outlets. So as a consequence, these records all shipped gold, returned platinum. And in the mid-70s, you could pick up these records in every bargain bin in the United Kingdom and the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. A regular fixture.
And I've got these 4, and they're 4 of my most prized records. And I doubt if I paid more than 75p for any of them. They were absolutely everywhere. So those records came out, and in the words of P.G. Woodhouse, died like a louse in a Russian's
beard.
And so consequently, his next record was called, that's the record.
I love this.
It was called And the Hits Keep On Coming.
That's right.
That's the kind of the kind of sense of humor that Michael Nesmith had absolutely all through. I found this today. He started his own record label because he could afford to do these things because, and we should talk about his late mother.
Well, two big sources of income, weren't there? There was his mum's thing and Pacific
Betty
Art
Nesmith. And and the second
his
big
mum invented
a
correction fluid, didn't she, called liquid paper?
His mother was and raised him alone. She was separated from his father. She raised him alone, and she was a legal secretary, and clearly a woman of considerable resource because she invented a form of liquid correction paper, which, for the benefit of younger listeners, fulfilled the function that the delete key on your computer now fulfills. It was the thing that the media economy absolutely depended on.
Incredible now that we used to, when you made a mistake with your typing, you would get this little pot out and you would paste with a tiny brush this kind of white paint over the top of it. When it dried, you could then type over it.
You'd type over the top of it.
I remember Smash Hits copy sometimes used to rock on the table. It was so hard with Tipex.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, he could afford to start a record label. He started a label called Countryside. And I found this morning, which is one wonderful example of Michael Nesmith's gallows humor. He put out a record by his steel player, which is kind of nice record, but it's got a lovely title, like so many Michael Nesmith records. Lovely title. This is called Velvet Hammer in a Cowboy Band. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it is.
Velvet Hammer in a Cowboy Band. And so the inner bag has got, here for your convenience, it's got a picture. Here for your convenience are the many other fine album in the vast Countryside catalogue. And it's got a picture of one other record, which is the Carl and Frady record, Pure Country. So if you bought a CBS record of those in those days, you got hundreds of things.
That's right.
Countryside, they had one other fine album in the vast collection.
I love him for that.
And then this, which I think is probably, I was out playing it only this morning. It seemed to go with the fact the sun was shining. Perfect early morning sunshine.
I'm trying to,
Pretty much your standard average ranch stash. Pretty much your standard ranch stash, which he came out in the mid 70s, which on the humor. It's got a very nice picture of him here wearing a cowboy hat. He's just winking, and if you close up on alongside his wink, it says, "Buy this record."
Yes,
knowing that nobody would at all, and. It's gone on the second side of this, which I do heartily recommend. I'm going to offer you a slight tangent here, Mark, involving one of my few experiences with drugs. Can I do this?
Go on. I don't think. Well, you have never told me this. I don't think. My goodness.
Okay, I'm very bad with drugs. I always have been. I
know you're hopeless.
They're too much faff, they're just too much trouble, and they turn people into raging bores in my experience. But anyway,
true.
In 1974 or whenever it was that this record came out, I was living in a flat in above Wood Green High Road with Stuart, one of my flatmates.
I remember.
And we were both very big on Michael Nesmith, and we somehow. Danny Kelly and Danny Baker tell the story about when they attempted to go to.
When they're in Amsterdam, they go to.
When they went to Amsterdam to try and
they
take.
Can't get anything right. You need skins. You have to buy some papers.
Well, me and Stuart were a bit like that. They was just impractically. We couldn't deal with the kind of Blue Peter end of drug taking. They like to cut to the consumption end of it rather than the construction end of it. Yeah. But anyway, we managed to configure some form of joint, and we listened to Michael Nesmith that record while under the influence of mildly under the influence of cannabis resin or whatever, and it was extraordinary. I can remember halfway through the second side. When he does
this stuff isn't underrated at all.
Absolutely. When he burst from the FFV to Uncle Pen, his version of Uncle Pen, well, we just sat there with smiles all over our faces, and I thought, this is how a lot of people listen to music absolutely all the time, and I can entirely see why they do. But then,
It's what Michael Nesmith
again,
would have wanted.
is what Michael Nesmith would definitely want. But then again, I thought afterwards, I can't be asked, to go to all that trouble. I'd rather deal with this kind of stuff sober, But so Michael Nesmith, extraordinary career, and he later on,
and
he had the
inventor of video. It's a story, isn't it?
Absolutely. He had a company called Pacific Arts Rio that we were talking about earlier. And Island Records wanted to put it out. They thought it was a hit, quite rightly, because he got played on the radio lots. Everybody liked Rio, but it was never a hit. And they were looking for a way to promote him. They just gave him some money, said, just make a thing called a video. And so he made a kind of abstract type video.
Well, it's abstract. It's not a performance video, is it? I mean, you could argue Bohemian Rhapsody and stuff. It's kind of them singing the song, but this is a kind of strange, kind of science fiction, sort of old kind of fantasy, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And it definitely kind of foreshadowed lots of the things that happened in video later on. But he was involved in video. He was a great believer in the video disc, I think. And he probably invested. He had a company called Pacific Arts, which did invest in things because he had money to invest. And he bought the home video rights to some of PBS's most popular programs. PBS is the American Public Broadcasting.
Right,
and they sued him over royalties. And he took him to court and he won, which is remarkable. And the court awarded him $47 million. And I got a quote here. And he was asked what he thought about it. This is PBS, which is like the American BBC, who'd taken him to court. He says, it's like catching your grandmother stealing your stereo. You're glad to get your stereo back, but you're sad to find out that grandma's the thief.
The Word Podcast, prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
So 40 years ago, at number one, was Don't You Want Me? Which
God, is it really?
Oh, my God. When we were at Smash Hits, in fact, sticking them on the cover. And which I think is an interesting story because Phil Oakey hated that song.
He hated it.
He didn't want it on the album and he refused it. And eventually he had to compromise and they let him, they put it on as the last track on the
last track on the album.
And then they decided after two hits already that they thought it would be a big single. Martin Rush, the producer, and Simon Draper at Virgin. And Oakey was so resistant to it that he would only allow it out if you got a large poster free with each 7-inch single because he thought it was such a rip-off. He described it as our Des O'Connor song. And of course, it was a massive hit. And a massive hit partly because it was a duet. It's like a country western song, isn't it? There's that kind of it's that response between the two of them, and the fact that the girls were now part of the Human League, which made a lot of difference. I mean, originally, actually, he was going to sing that song as a solo, but then he saw A Star Is Born and thought that a duet would be a good idea. But the joining of the girls, I think, is an extraordinary story because I'd completely forgotten this, that Martin Weir, and Ian Craig Marsh had just left, hadn't they?
Yeah.
And he was in debt, Oakey and the Human League, massively in debt to Virgin because they hadn't really had any hits. They were contracted to go on tour. If they didn't do this tour, there was going to be a legal action whereby they would be relieved of so much cash that the group would go bust. So he had to recruit new members of the band and fulfill the tour obligation. And then decided to go with his girlfriend to the Crazy Daisy Disco. And all that was true in Sheffield.
The Crazy Daisy.
And look at various people. And they saw these two girls on the dance floor. One was 17, I think one was 18, and who danced okay. They weren't great dancers, but they just looked interesting and he thought they looked glamorous. He offered them the job on the spot to be members of the Human League and come on this European tour. They were at school, and they had to go to the school and say, would it be all right if we went on this tour? And amazingly, the school said that they thought it'd be educational and they were allowed to do it. They then asked their parents, they said, absolutely not. So Phil Oakey, this is where it becomes a movie. This is Phil Oakey. You remember at the time had the lopsided hair. He had the red lipstick on stage, the chain on his ear, the red high heels. Do you remember?
He's not a figure to reassure a nervous parent.
No, he's not. Not. And he then went round to Joanne and Suzanne's parents' houses to reassure them that they
which you would have thought was the worst possible idea.
I know, incredible. And astonishingly, they said yes, and that was the major transformative moment for the Human League, really, I think. Apart from the fact they were writing slightly better kind of pop songs, but just the look of them, the way that connected, the idea that you had these two girls that anybody in the audience thought was kind of, that could almost be me. You know, they're not great dancers, they're not great singers, they're kind of like members of the audience who got up on stage. And, you know, I bless them. What a great record.
I can't think of a group more utterly transformed by the addition of two members than the Human League were.
No, because before that they were kind of electronics boffins, weren't they?
They belonged to the arts pages before then, and you know, and after them they belonged on the front pages. And of course they're still around, aren't they?
Still around.
They're still playing and still performing. Extraordinary. Another anniversary.
Oh, it was the ELO record, wasn't it?
Well, it's 50 years. 50 years since the release of the first ELO record, which obviously had Roy Wood alongside Jeff Lynne with 10538 Orchestra Overture or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And of course that means it's 50 years since the American version of it came out, which they weren't sure whether it had a title or not. And so somebody from the American record company was delegated to call the English record company and check whether it had a title or not. And so this person tried and eventually came back with the reply, no answer on a note. Right. On a note. So consequently, when the record came out of the United States, it was called No Answer by the Electric Light Orchestra.
I love that story.
Happy days. Happy days.
Did they try and explain what it was? Because I can remember with Odyssey and Oracle. Do you remember that by
Zombies? Yeah.
Zombies. And that the Odyssey was spelt wrong. And they just tried to kind of say it was deliberate, but actually the graphic designer simply couldn't spell it right, and then nobody subbed it, and you stuck with it forever.
And checking things was hard in those days.
It was.
The other thing they let us reflect upon the fact that 50 years ago this week, I think the American charts were topped by what is still the most radical record ever to go to number one in the United States of America. What am I talking about? Frank Zappa? No. What am I talking about? Country Joe and the Fish? No. What am I talking about? Led Zeppelin? No. Sly and the Family Stone. Yeah. There's a riot going on, which is absolutely, if you listen to it now, 50 years later, you think, what planet has that come from? How strange, how radical, how utterly out there in every single respect is there's a riot going on. And of course, it was taken there by the fact that the biggest, one of the biggest singles of the year, and the single that absolutely everybody loved, was Family Affair, of course, which got played on every single radio station. But if you listen to
they had
that
a big white following too, didn't they? After Woodstock,
it was
big.
It was everybody liked Sly and the Family Stone, and also one of the first examples of a kind of rhythm machine being used on a record.
Yeah, it's a drum machine, isn't it?
There's a Rhythm King drum machine, it was called. And I'm pretty sure the exact same instrument was used on another record made round about the same time, but didn't come out until the following year, which is apparently from a very different point of the compass, but they used the same tools, which is J.J. Cale's Call Me the Breeze, which starts, if you hear it now, starts with a sound.
It's got a very, very particular sound, doesn't it?
Yeah, very, very particular sound. And those are the revolutions, aren't they? They're very often the revolution, the musical revolutions are very often rhythmic rather than anything else. It's finding a different way of doing the rhythm, like the Bee Gees on whichever of the Bee Gees records it was, but they looped the tape, because the drummer had gone to a funeral. And George McRae's "Rock Your Baby," and not long afterwards, "Donna Summer, I Feel Love," which Brian, took to the session and played it to David Bowie and said, "In the future, all records will sound like this."
And how right he was.
And he was right.
Absolutely
how right
correct.
he was.
Yeah.
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
Any other business? We're joined by, as ever, by Alex Gold. Alex has just come off stage pretty much from being, Keith Richards?
Yeah,
You remember the Rolling Stones?
I
this
do
weekend,
love
weren't you?
this because Alex, as regular listeners will know, was playing the part of John Lennon about a week ago. Then straight to Ian McLagan of the Small Faces, and last night Keith Richards. Sensational.
yeah. I got a call first thing on Friday morning saying we've lost our Keith. We don't know where he is. They literally don't know where he is.
Oh, he'd wandered.
message,
That's
isn't
good.
it?
That's good.
That's on brand.
Can't get in touch with him. He's gone completely off grid. Can you do 3 nights at a theatre in Bridgnorth from
A
tonight?
coconut had fallen out of a tree and knotted it somewhere.
Right.
So
ladder
the
in his
3
library.
nights at a theatre in Bridgnorth, Shropshire, is that right?
It is Shropshire. Yeah, it's the theatre on the steps, and it is literally mid. So Bridgnorth is a 2-tiered town. Half of it's on top of the cliff, and half of it's in a valley. And the theatre is sort of halfway up the cliff. So it is literally in the middle of about 500 steps.
So 3 nights. 3 nights.
Yeah.
That's
Very
really good.
good. Very
Big
good.
crowds. How big's the audience?
It's a small theatre. It probably holds 250 people, I'd say.
That's great.
But yeah, it's been healthily attended both nights. Tonight's probably going to be quieter. It is Sunday after all, but it's also considering the current unpleasantness, it seems to be
That's
pretty
really
healthy.
good.
So yeah, lots of people in masks.
One thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about Michael Nesmith, I picked up, we were saying I picked up those wonderful records in the early 70s for about 70. I don't think I paid more than 75p for any of them. And yesterday I was in town and I'm on a bit of a jazz buying, tip.
Nice.
I happened to go into FOP, and there's a rack. They've racked out a load of.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's just a load of overstocked CDs that have been sitting in some kind of warehouse or whatever, and so I ended up buying Kenny Burrell's Midnight Blue there, Lee Morgan's Sidewinder, the first Herbie Hancock record, the Gil Evans Orchestra, Sonny Rollins' The Bridge, Miles Davis in concert, £4 each. £4
Wow.
each.
It's ridiculous.
So
isn't it?
it's just ridiculous. And so here is my point that I'd like to place before the massive and see if people have got, if they think it's right or if it's wrong. Is it not the case, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Is
I
it
think you'll
not
find.
the case? I think you'll find, places hands on lapels. I think you'll find that the less you pay for a record, the better it is. Because if you're paying a lot of money for a record, it's usually new. That's how it works. And you haven't kind of worked out whether it's worth it or not. If it's still on the market years later in some shape or form at a budget price, it's probably better. Is that not the case? The records you paid hardly anything for have turned out to be
because
the
you're
biggest
giddy
winners
with
of
the
all.
fact that you've already had your £4 value after listening to the first 2 tracks.
I suppose so. But, if somebody's bothered to put this record out and make it available again, 50 years after it was made, it's probably quite good. If it's the latest thing, here's the I put this forward. I think this is pretty infallible. New records are overrated. Old records are underrated. Has to be the case. Because it's just the machinery of the business. Isn't
that the engine that drives all reviews
thing
in music magazines? It's always kind of massive enthusiasm for the new one because you're caught up in, I don't know, just the fact that it's out and it's new and you want that group on the cover of your magazine and you want it to be good. But it's I remember on Q, I think, didn't we start a thing? I think I started a thing where people start to re-review records 3 or 4, maybe 6 months later when they've lived with them for a while. Occasionally put a little column in saying these things turned out to be fantastic. because you had a chance to get used to them. That's what you want to know.
So if anybody's got any experience of that, we'd be interested in hearing about it. What email would people use to get in touch with us, Alex? I suppose email's rather old-fashioned way of doing it, isn't it?
wiye.london@gmail.com is where we live.
Okay, and we got
Patreons.
some reader. Have we got new Patreons? You want to do that, Alex?
I think we have.
I'm finally in a position. I think I said ages ago, wouldn't it be nice if we had a bosun's whistle and then we could pipe them aboard? Well, Dave Holly, friend of the pod, was listening, and Dave got in touch with me the other day. Said, I want to send you something from Grimsby. And I said, it's not fish, is it? He said, no. And he says, but it's something that came off a boat. And here it's come, the bosun's whistle. Thank you very much, Steve, for that.
People aboard.
We can now. I can pipe people aboard. So, yeah, Alex, if you want to read them out, I shall attempt to provide accompaniment that's not too shrill. Okay, here you go.
Okie doke, here we go. Lindy Morrison.
Hey, go on.
It's great.
Julian Kemp.
Welcome aboard, Julian.
Rick Halen. Janet Davies, who's a birthday patron.
I should be getting a kazoo or something and joining in.
Fantastic.
That's really good.
Joe Galloway.
Wonderful.
Welcome aboard.
Fantastic.
Well, welcome aboard. Yeah, the first one's to be piped aboard. So if you'd like to be officially piped aboard yourself, if you go to patreon.com, word in your ear, and find a way that you can get involved, and that signal honor could be extended to you in a future week. And thanks very much indeed for Dave Holly
coming on board. That's brilliant.
To Dave Holly for providing. Dave, incidentally, I'll give a plug to Dave. Does a very interesting and very good podcast called Sound of the Hound, which is, if you're very interested in the early days of recording, the very early days of recording, is highly recommended. Reader's correspondence from Colin Chalmers has sent us this via Patreon, because I think I'd suggested that the bands who played at Live Aid, nobody got bigger after Live Aid. He says, well, U2 did. But yeah, fair enough. They definitely did. And U2 and Queen were, while always a big band, but there was a huge increase in their profile.
Several got smaller. Adamant, didn't he?
Absolutely. And the other thing you wanted to talk about was, how have we now seen the death of the live album? He said, it used to be a great thrill for him while browsing through rhythmic records in Greenock and finding a live album. Even better, a double gatefold live album, even possibly everything on the top shelf from the Budokan. That was the ideal thing, was something to get excited about.
How many people recorded live albums at the Budokan? Loads, didn't they?
Well, I think it was part of the deal. If you did the tour, if you did a Japanese tour, you recorded the Budokan because you would sell it again in Japan, wouldn't you? Yeah. Because Japan is interesting, and the people probably still do record live albums at the Budokan because Japan still has a very, very strong record market, doesn't it? Streaming has never really taken over in Japan. But he wants to know, is it because in Scotland, that it was hard to see decent bands, and also because it was like an alternate greatest hits album, or that sometimes the live versions were your preferred version. I think it's another thing, Colin, and I don't know if I'm going to find agreement here. Was it not? If your favorite band made a live album, you got it, you repaired to your room, you took out a tennis racket or whatever was your chosen implement.
Oh, yeah.
You turned the lights down and you hoped your mum and dad were out or whatever.
You hit the opening chord and heard a roar of applause.
And you just acted out the entire record. Did you or did you not? I was guilty. I'm prepared.
We've all done it.
We've done that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Alex, you must have done that, Alex.
Oh, yeah. I still managed to play a bum note and a tennis racket, though.
Still came in late on a tennis racket. So yeah, Colin, that's what I think was the great thrill, to make yourself a star, in your imagination, in your bedroom. Maybe people don't do that anymore. Maybe it's something to do with social media. Everything's to do with social media, isn't it, nowadays?
Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to let you into a little secret. Before I was into the rock, I was quite into 90s techno as a young boy, and I used to buy my techno singles and repair to my room. And make
What, with a glow stick in it?
No, I used to make up dances.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Did you give
used
them
to
names?
make up dances?
I used to make up dances, yeah.
Did you give them names?
I did. No, I gave one move a name. It was called the crisscross, where you used to sort of walk and cross your legs in front of each other.
That's great.
Then I changed and I discovered the guitar, and the dancing shoes went in the bin, which is best for everybody, really. But there we go.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.